The broadcast began without warning, hijacking every civilian and military channel across the neutral zones. Static warped into a cold metallic chamber where General Marcus Hale stood shackled upright, wrists locked in clamps designed to restrain star beasts. His uniform was torn but still unmistakably human, black, scorched at the edges, marked with the silver crest of Earth Command. The Galactic Empire's crest loomed behind him, pulsing like an arrogant heartbeat. The announcer's voice dripped triumph as he declared to trillions of viewers that humanity's greatest field commander had been captured after a border skirmish the Empire itself had engineered. They wanted a spectacle, not justice. Hale didn't bow his head or give them fear. His posture stayed firm despite the restraints digging into his skin. The executioners expected pleading, threats, or desperate bravado. Instead, he offered nothing but unbroken silence and a gaze that made even the armored guards shift uneasily. Cameras zoomed in to catch any flicker of fear. They found none. Even in defeat, he looked like the one assessing them, not the other way around. The Empire's speaker stepped into view, robes trailing across the metallic floor as he proclaimed the sentence, "Death by immolation, live and unedited." A punishment banned across 88 star systems. A method meant to humiliate, not simply kill. The crowd of aliens gathered in the arena responded with hushed tension. Many didn't cheer. They had heard stories of humans, stories whispered in war rooms about how resilient, unpredictable, and dangerous they became when wronged. Burning one alive felt less like victory and more like tempting something catastrophic. Flames hissed to life at the base of the platform, controlled by finely tuned emitters engineered to prolong suffering. The Empire wanted to make an example of him, to shatter whatever courage humanity possessed. Hale inhaled once, slow and deep, as if preparing himself for the unavoidable. He lifted his head, looked directly into the central broadcast lens, and spoke with a voice steady enough to cut through static. "Tell my people." His breath slowed, but the words carried across the galaxy like a blade. "I held the line." The speaker signaled the executioners. The flames rose, climbing from ankles upward in controlled increments, wrapping him in heat meant to break spirits. No one watching heard a scream. Not a single cry. Only the roar of fire and the pounding silence that followed as his body finally went still. The flames died down, leaving behind a charred silhouette that remained upright as if refusing to kneel even in death. The speaker tried to boast of victory, but his voice trembled. Even he had seen it, the defiance that outlived the man. Across neutral worlds, screens went dark. Millions of aliens stood frozen in horror. Such brutality belonged to ancient ages, not a modern empire claiming superiority. Even species long at odds with humans whispered the same thought: the Empire has gone too far. On Earth's orbital command stations, the broadcast ended with officers staring at frozen frames of Hale's final seconds. No one spoke. The silence was not grief. It was pressure building, rage sharpening into something cold and precise. Within the High Command Chamber, Earth's Strategic Council exchanged only one look before the Supreme Commander reached for a secure console, turned a key embedded in glass, and sent a forward transmission across every classified military network. Protocol Black Star. Confirm. No fanfare, no dramatic alarms. Just confirmations flashing across the system as fleets, bases, and black site installations responded instantly. For centuries, Black Star had existed only as a myth, a contingency whispered among high-ranking strategists. Its confirmation meant humanity wasn't preparing for retaliation. They were preparing for extermination-level war against whoever dared provoke them this way. Across human colonies, civilians watched the replay in stunned silence. Grief came first, sharp and devastating. Then something far older stirred beneath it, something that had driven humans through every catastrophe in their history: resolve. Strangers embraced. Soldiers clenched fists. Families whispered Hale's final words as if vowing to carry them forward. Humanity didn't shout. Humanity didn't threaten. Humanity simply went quiet. And the galaxy, recognizing the weight of that silence, began to tremble. The moment Black Star Protocol activated, humanity shifted from grieving to execution mode. Entire star systems felt the tremor of orbital shipyards roaring awake, spilling waves of dormant dreadnoughts into the void. Engines that hadn't ignited in decades lit up with blue-white fury as humanity's war machines synchronized with flawless precision. There were no speeches, no emotional declarations, only rapid, silent mobilization that demonstrated a species acting with purpose sharper than vengeance. In the command citadel above Earth, Admiral Reyes reviewed the flood of confirmations appearing across the tactical holoboards. Every fleet group, every covert strike wing, every deep space garrison accepted Black Star without hesitation. Humanity did not question orders when survival and dignity were at stake. Reyes had served with Hale for years. She knew he never asked for loyalty, yet earned it from every soldier who crossed his path. His death didn't shatter morale, it calcified it into something unbreakable. Orbital factories reconfigured for full-scale war production. Civilian miners rerouted shipments of refined ore directly to military shipyards. Terraforming arrays on distant colonies were overridden to fuel antimatter reactors. Human societies didn't require coercion. They moved as if each individual instinctively understood the weight of the moment. Even distant outposts, tiny settlements carved into asteroids, sent transmissions promising resources, volunteers, anything needed to avenge their fallen general. Project Titan, long sealed under classified vaults, activated under Reyes' command. Massive kinetic strike vessels, larger than most alien cities, detached from their construction cradles. Their hulls bore no ornamentation, only matte black plating designed to swallow starlight. They were pure, focused destruction, meant for wars humanity hoped would never come. Their engines pulsed like the heartbeat of a giant awakening from its sleep. While fleets mobilized, human intelligence divisions launched a sweeping cyber-offensive. Thousands of infiltration programs burrowed through communication relays, decrypting Empire codes, mapping every defensive grid, and dissecting every supply route. Empire analysts didn't even realize their secure channels were compromised. Human AIs had already rewritten routing protocols to hide their presence. Reyes watched as intelligence reports streamed in, revealing weaknesses the Empire believed impossible to exploit. She issued the first operational directive, a swift, silent strike against the Empire's border citadel at Varos Gate, a fortress believed to be unassailable. Human fleets arrived without announcing themselves, emerging from warp in perfect formation. The Empire's defense arrays detected them a fraction too late. Titan-class ships aligned their cannons and unleashed kinetic lances that hit with the force of planetary impacts. Shields evaporated. Walls designed to endure centuries shattered like glass. In 12 seconds, Varos Gates ceased to exist. Not disabled. Not damaged. Gone. News of the destruction spread faster than the Empire could respond. In the Imperial Senate, chaos erupted as officials struggled to comprehend how humans bypassed every layer of defense. Tactical advisors insisted the fortress had no exploitable flaws. That belief died the instant hollow footage of the smoking debris reached the chamber. The Emperor dismissed warnings, insisting humans were simply emotional creatures acting rashly after witnessing their general's death. He couldn't see what the rest of the galaxy recognized instantly. Humanity wasn't lashing out. They were executing a calculated campaign that had been prepared long before Hale's capture. Alien diplomats pleaded with the Empire to de-escalate, terrified of facing a species that fought with cold precision instead of bluster. Systems under Imperial rule whispered among themselves, wondering whether the Empire had awakened something far beyond its control. The Empire responded with arrogance, reinforcing fleets and vowing to crush Earth's retaliation. Reyes stood on the command deck, observing the unfolding panic with an expression carved from stone. She transmitted her next message across secure human channels, her words clipped and emotionless. "This is not retaliation. This is Phase 1. Every ship acknowledged. Every soldier prepared. Humanity had begun its march, and nothing in the galaxy was ready for what would follow." Human cyber warfare hit the Empire long before the next human fleet arrived. Entire command relays began malfunctioning without warning. Navigation databanks scrambled their own coordinates. Supply convoys departed one planet and reappeared drifting helplessly in empty space, their routes overridden by invisible hands. Imperial officers suspected internal sabotage until analysts uncovered the truth. Someone had bypassed their top-tier encryption and seized control of their core networks. The realization struck too late. Humanity had already mapped every logistical artery, every fuel depot, every fleet deployment pattern the Empire relied on. Meanwhile, on worlds across Imperial territory, Black Ops units carried out missions with impossible synchronization. They liberated labor camps, armed resistance groups, and hijacked surveillance towers. In less than a week, 23 oppressed species rose in coordinated uprisings, each pushed to action after receiving encrypted transmissions carrying Hale's final words. The Empire tried stamping out each rebellion, but their forces moved like blind giants, powerful, yet stumbling, unable to anticipate where humans would strike next. Every time an Imperial garrison prepared to counterattack, its weapons mysteriously powered down or its commanders vanished before dawn. On the battlefield, human adaptability became the Empire's nightmare. 3 decisive engagements shattered their confidence completely. At the Shard Nebula, an Imperial armada outnumbered human forces 5-1. Standard logic predicted a crushing human defeat. Instead, humans used the nebula's ionized dust to confuse the Empire's targeting systems, weaving between energy storms the Empire considered impassable. When the dust cleared, the Imperial flagship drifted powerless, its crew stunned at how quickly their tactical advantage dissolved. The second blow landed at Cortez Prime. Imperial walkers, each the size of towers, guarded deep shield emitters powering the planet's defensive dome. Human marines landed under cover of kinetic debris, bypassing the walkers entirely, attacking the shield grid's nerve centers with surgical precision. The dome collapsed before the Empire realized they were fighting inside their own lines. Not a single marine withdrew. The final breaking point came at the siege of Erdras, a fortress moon built to repel entire coalitions. The Empire reinforced it with its best strategists, knowing it was the keystone of their inner defense ring. Humans didn't bombard it. They didn't engage its planetary cannons. Instead, they infiltrated its atmospheric layers using high-altitude suits and severed the fortress's power conduits buried under kilometers of rock. When the defenses blinked offline, human fleets appeared without firing a shot. Erdras surrendered in under 15 minutes. Rumors spread faster than official reports. Empire soldiers whispered that humans learned enemy strategies before they were implemented. Commanders rewrote battle plans only to discover humans adjusting preemptively mid-engagement. To the Empire, this felt supernatural. To humans, it was simply discipline, observation, and cold calculation sharpened by centuries of adversity. Across Imperial space, entire regions lost faith. Governors quietly abandoned their posts. Some defected outright, offering intelligence to humanity in exchange for protection. On several worlds, Imperial banners were torn down by civilians who barely knew humanity but understood that the Empire could no longer protect them. Inside the Imperial capital, paranoia consumed the Emperor. He blamed spies, traitors, and foreign infiltration, executing advisors who dared speak the truth. Every defeat fed his fear. Screens across the palace replayed Hale's execution, but now it was no longer a symbol of dominance. It was a curse that had ignited a war they could not win. Reyes reviewed the collapsing map of Imperial influence from her war table, watching systems flicker red, then dark, then blue as they fell under human control. Her next strategy required no speech, no explanation. Humanity had dismantled the Empire's outer shell and fractured its core. Now they would strike at the heart. She transmitted a single directive to every fleet. Prepare for Operation Solar Grave. Across billions of kilometers, human ships adjusted formation. The final march toward the Empire's capital had begun. Human fleets emerged into the inner ring with a silence that felt heavier than any battle cry. The Empire had fortified this region for millennia, weaving together weapon platforms, psychic guardians, and ancient machines whose creators no longer existed. Yet the moment humanity crossed the threshold, Every defensive array flickered under the strain of system failures triggered by human cyber infiltration planted days earlier. What was meant to be the Empire's most impregnable shield became a patchwork of unstable firepower struggling to come online. The Empire responded by unleashing weapons reserved only for existential threats, vast bioengineered titans drifting through space like living fortresses. Their carapaces glowed with energy strong enough to cleave asteroids, and each roar rippled through vacuum as gravitational distortion. Human ships met them without hesitation. Rail cannons, guided drones, and plasma lances fired in perfectly staggered intervals, tearing through organic armor with ruthless precision. When the Biotitans adapted, shifting their shielding patterns, humans adjusted mid-engagement, exploiting new weaknesses before the creatures even finished evolving. Closer to the capital world, elite Imperial Guard fleets formed a barrier of silver hulls stretching from orbit to upper atmosphere. They were disciplined, loyal, and utterly unprepared for opponents who moved as if reading their intent. Human formation groups split into synchronized wings, weaving through enemy fire as if each vessel shared a single mind. Every volley landed where it would break structure, not merely destroy ships. Within minutes, the Empire's proudest fleet fractured into isolated pockets unable to regroup. Meanwhile, specialized ground units prepared for insertion. The No Brigade, immune to psychic attacks thanks to neural dampening matrices, led the charge toward the capital's psionic bastions. Imperial seers attempted to shatter their minds, only to recoil as their vision stalled against impenetrable silence. Null soldiers advanced without slowing, disabling psionic amplifiers with detonation charges placed in geometric precision. Above them, the Helldiver units initiated high-velocity orbital insertions. They pierced atmospheric plasma storms that would have vaporized conventional craft, their descent pods wrapped in ablative plating that shed fire like molten rain. They struck the Palace District with such speed that Imperial defenders barely registered the impacts before Helldivers breached defensive corridors and seized control of key choke points. Simultaneously, the Void Walker operatives infiltrated the Imperial Citadel using stealth fields that bent light and sound. They bypassed layered security grids, eliminating sentries with efficient movements meant to conserve energy rather than intimidate. By the time the palace alarms activated, Void Walkers were already deep inside, severing command feeds and isolating the Emperor's throne chamber. The battle in orbit reached its apex as human dreadnoughts converged on the capital's planetary shield. The Empire activated its oldest superweapon, a lattice of energy beams forming a defensive star-shaped barrier. It was a relic feared across generations. Human strategists dismantled it in under 4 minutes. They targeted the energy couplings hidden beneath the planetary crust, delivering synchronized strikes that collapsed the lattice in a cascade of dying light. Civilians on the capital watched in disbelief as human ships descended through the falling shield. They had been raised to believe humanity was primitive, reckless, an inferior species driven by emotion. Yet the forces approaching them were coordinated, disciplined, and impossibly controlled. Fear spread faster than any evacuation order. Inside the throne room, the Emperor attempted to escape via a secure transit corridor, only to find Void Walkers waiting. He froze as Admiral Reyes appeared via hologram projected into the chamber. Her expression held no triumph, only cold clarity. The Emperor sputtered excuses about maintaining supremacy, insisting Hale's execution was necessary for stability. Reyes didn't raise her voice. She simply reminded him that cruelty had consequences he failed to imagine. Human forces breached the palace perimeter in a wave that overwhelmed remaining resistance. The Empire's heart, once considered untouchable, lay exposed before humanity's advance. Reyes issued her command across all channels, clear and unwavering. Secure the capital. Begin judgment. The Empire had reached its end, not through annihilation, but through the unstoppable discipline of a species that refused to bow. The fall of the imperial capital didn't bring celebration from humanity. There were no victory parades, no triumphant declarations. Human forces moved with the same controlled precision they had maintained since the moment Hale died. City districts were secured without collateral slaughter. Civilians were guided to safe zones. Medical teams assisted wounded aliens regardless of species or allegiance. The galaxy expected conquerors. Instead, they witnessed a disciplined force that measured every action with purpose, not malice. In the heart of the palace, human investigators uncovered archives documenting centuries of oppression, forced labor worlds, and covert extermination projects. Hale's execution was not an isolated act but one piece in a long chain of brutality. The evidence spread across liberated networks, igniting outrage among species who had once accepted the Empire as an unshakable authority. Uprisings intensified, not driven by human involvement but by the sudden clarity of what they had endured. Rhea stood before the central broadcast dais, connecting her signal to every system formerly under Imperial control. Her image was steady, unadorned, and free of theatrics. She addressed millions of frightened civilians and countless more watching from distant sectors. She declared that humanity had no intention of replacing the Empire or carving out a dominion. Instead, she announced public trials for every war criminal, beginning with the officials responsible for Hale's death. There would be no secret executions, no vanished leaders, only open accountability broadcast across all frequencies. When the trials began, the chamber overflowed with representatives from liberated worlds. Evidence of cruelty that had been buried for decades was projected into the air: torture programs, illegal conquests, forced relocations. And among these files, Hale's execution stood as the final spark that collapsed an empire built on fear. Witnesses from dozens of species testified, recounting years spent under Imperial rule. The judges, an equal mixture of human and alien delegates, passed sentence on each culprit with measured fairness. The Emperor, stripped of authority, attempted to blame his advisors, claiming ignorance and manipulation. No one believed him. Reyes watched in silence as the verdict was delivered. The punishment was not torture or execution, but exile to a remote world with no communication, a fate chosen by the very people he once dominated. He left the courtroom pale and silent, escorted by guards who no longer saluted him. Across Imperial space, liberated worlds lowered the banners of their former rulers. Human engineers restored power grids, rebuilt water systems, and established temporary governance structures designed to dissolve once stability was regained. Humanity didn't seize territory. They restored independence. When the final trial concluded, Reyes issued a message meant not for the defeated Empire but for the entire galaxy. Her voice remained calm, steady, carrying no threat yet leaving no doubt. She explained that humanity had acted not out of conquest, but necessity. They had been pushed to the brink by a regime that mistook restraint for weakness. She ended with a warning spoken with the precision of a closing seal. Let this be the lesson that shapes your future. We did not start this war. But if ever again you believe terror can break us, remember what followed when you tried. The message resonated across thousands of worlds. Species long trapped under Imperial rule pledged new alliances built on cooperation instead of fear. Trade routes reopened. Diplomatic envoys traveled to Earth seeking partnerships rather than protection. The galaxy, once fractured by dominance, became bound by a shared understanding of consequences. General Hale's memory was honored on a newly designated memorial world. A monument of black stone stood at its center, carved with the words he spoke before his death. Pilgrims from every species visited the site, not to revere war, but to remember resolve. As humanity withdrew its fleets, leaving behind only advisors and humanitarian teams, observers watched in disbelief. They had expected occupation, control, expansion. Instead, human ships turned away once order was restored. The Empire was gone, the galaxy reshaped, and humanity asked for nothing in return. On a distant colony, a young alien child looked up at the retreating human carriers and asked their parent whether humans were heroes or monsters. The parent, eyes fixed on the fading lights, answered quietly that humanity was something far more dangerous than either. A people who acted only when pushed too far, and who never forgot the price of cruelty. The galaxy understood, and vowed never to provoke them again.